Priya, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
I've got to take you back to the beginning because almost your career path has been everything my father dreamed that I'd be having.
I'm not sure about that.
Well, you started kind of a lawyer.
Yes.
So, okay, we're a lawyer, but at what point and when do you decide that you wanted to do more or do something different and become the person you become?
Well, everyone's got their story, right?
Yes,
Everyone has their journey, and it's all these different events and different people that influence you, that lead you to where you are. So I don't think it's a case of when I was really young, if somebody had turned around to me and said, you're going to be running a technology company, I would have just laughed at them and said, what are you talking about? But actually what would have happened when I was younger was I would have said, I don't believe you, because I was constantly told that I wasn't bright enough to do much.
Okay.
So I was one of those kids at school who, the grammar school sort of took one look at me and said, well, she's not the cream of the crop. So, and actually they kept asking me to leave that grammar school and enroll somewhere else. One of those stories. But so as a child, I was always just really entrepreneurial. My brother really taught me these skills. He was just like, let's go and buy new unsold Costco stock in auctions and go and flog it. Do you remember the loot? Remember that yellow paper? That we used to have. So it's the old sort of eBay on paper. So we used to do that and make lots of money. And I learned how to be quite entrepreneurial, sell chocolate bars for a profit at school.
Yes.
And
did your brother sit with you fairly, or was he?
No, that was all mine. I think he taught me. He's 3.5 years older than me, so he's fantastic. But in our local area, my father used to say the same thing. He's Del Boy and I'm Rodney. So we had this constant,
Now I've got the imagery going on.
These two little Indian kids going out there and making money. I used to actually give most of my money away to charity because I was always also wanting to try and change the world in some positive way. Because we'd spent lots of our long summers and winters in East Africa, so and that really affected me as a young child, and I wanted to change that. So I had this sort of personality growing up where I was actually quite quiet at school, and wanted to be under the radar, if you like. But I was entrepreneurial. I wanted to do good, and then for me, I just thought, well, being a lawyer sounds like the right career because it's all about justice and equity, and so went into law. Yes. But then 4 years as a barrister and, really working in-house and then sort of meddling with issues that weren't really in my department. My CFO of this newspaper company said, would you be interested in being on a management training scheme and potentially running a small newspaper one day? That's where it leads to. Okay. And that gave me the confidence that I needed. And I thought, well, if you think I can run a newspaper, maybe I could run my own business. And at this point, I'd already identified the gap in the market at the time, which were in food and FMCG, which was, there were no fresh ethnic sauces. And I thought, curry is the nation's favourite dish. So we have pasta sauces, where are the curry sauces? So I started Masala Masala. But that was my moment, because I'd also wanted to do something where I was really trying to improve the situation for the underprivileged in what we used to call developing countries. I know we don't necessarily classify them as that now. So I set up Masala Masala, and for every pot of sauce that I sold in Waitrose and Ocado and all these places, I managed to feed a homeless person a hot meal. We were funding schools, we were funding vaccine programs. And I was you can just imagine now being in your late 20s, just thinking, this is great. I'm running a company, right? And I'm doing what I wanted to do, and I'm using my entrepreneurial skill set. So it was fantastic.
And I remember it's around the time we first met. And one of the things that interested me at the time was it was just something you were naturally doing, rather than kind of, as in the sense of the social enterprise part of it. It was rather than it being almost the foundation of everything you were doing. It was there already for you intrinsically, which was ahead of its time, I suppose.
Yeah, it was a little bit. I mean, the one-for-one programme became a really big deal when Tom's Shoes did it. We did it in food. Yeah. And people started looking at it. And at the time when I met you, I remember being called into lots of boardrooms. Yes. As a bit of can you just give us a piece of advice on corporate social responsibility? And I remember going in saying, this is a board level issue, and you should be discussing it. I mean, now it is, but that was 10 years ago. So it was very natural for me, because I knew that I wanted to do something that was really significant. But the issue with that business always was day in, day out, I was selling curry sauces. Yes. And the corporate social responsibility part of it was very much a bolt-on to the business, right? If the business did well, we would then do really great things for people in need. And so when it sort of came about, it was all serendipity, but Vince Cable invited me to be on his board. And I learned about the issues in education. And at this point now, I've got 2 children too. So I'm also, as a mother, focused on education. I thought, here is a sector where there is no sort of bolt-on CSR. With education, the CSR is at its heart. Yeah, it's at its heart, it's at its core.
Yeah.
And I thought I've got the opportunity now to focus on something that could make, be a fundamental shift for those people who really need it. And I'm not just talking about people in those countries, I'm talking about people here. So it was that one statistic that shocked me, and I'm never going to forget it, that 1.8 million children were underperforming in UK schools, and we only have 8.2 million students. So that's nearly 20%.
Yeah.
And I thought, if we're failing to do what we need to do here, I'm funding schools replicating that model elsewhere. So why on earth are we replicating something that's not working? And so that led to the idea of, let's try and find out what's going on. Let's do some research. Let's be innovative. Let's not sort of look at what we're doing today and just try and shift it to make a small change. Let's just go from scratch. Whiteboard, ideas. What do we want to solve? What would education look like? What is it for? And then how could we come up with something quite disruptive?
When you say we, who was in the room with you at this point when you were...
Yeah, it's really interesting because my husband constantly tells me off for saying we, because he says most of it at this point was me. Okay. I say we because I've now got a team of 60.
Yes.
And I think it's all very well for me to say I did this. But because the reason I say we is because I was talking to lots of people about it. I was talking to teachers. So I had lots of people, at different times in a room with me, or I went to their schools and was asking them lots of questions. But all of this, as any disruptive business or social enterprise in our case would tell you, is a very iterative process. So yes, okay, initially it was me in a room just thinking, well, what do we do? But then teachers started joining me and started saying, well, this is what we need, and this is what we want to do, or this is what we're doing every day, but actually we're struggling. Kids, right? So sort of, children who want to give me their opinions on what education was like, head teachers, senior leaders. And then...
At this point, had you jumped fully into kind of, was Masala Masala now
a
distant memory?
Not really. Okay. It was sort of there, but we had huge issues as well in terms of, I was running it, right? We had, the recession had sort of finally hit that industry where they started increasing prices. So the margins were getting less and less. But what I'm doing with my margins is I'm funding charitable projects, so that affects that. No, it was there, and it was very much a decision for me. It was a conscious decision of what do I do. So I was never going to run Century. It didn't even have a name at this point. Okay. I'd done lots of research. Yeah. I'd figured out a solution, right, which is a technological solution that would help teachers, it would help learners. It's an artificially intelligent platform. No one's built it.
No, I'm going to come back on.
Yeah, we'll go back to that in a bit. But I'd come up with this idea, and then I said, let's build this to some members in government at the time, in the coalition government. Yeah. And they said, yes, and how we do this is through procurement. And then I looked at it and thought, no, we can't go through procurement to build it, right? You can go through procurement maybe to use products and services that are there, but for government to build complex systems, what it means generally is that they're going to go to a large company, right? It's going to take 15 years, £500 million of taxpayers' money, and we're not going to end up with what we really wanted. And we've got to have an agile process.
Many examples of that, are there?
Yeah, and I was sort of learning this along the way, but now I feel like I know this, but we don't want a waterfall method of project management. We want an agile, iterative company that can deal with, putting out a beta, putting out an MVP, et cetera, and growing. And so I just had a very big decision to make. And actually, Vince Cable never says this. Right, he never says this, but in Victoria Street, I won't forget that when this literally took seconds. It was 20 seconds of discussion, and I said, "We need this," and he just said, "Why don't you build it?" And that was it. And I sort of thought, "Yeah, why not me?" And I hadn't thought about it. So. And
did you have any moment of doubt's the wrong word, but any moment of, am I spreading myself too thin so I can't deliver?
It wasn't even that. So I had to go home and sort of say to my husband, what am I doing? Yeah. And he just said, you're mad to even think that you shouldn't build this tech company for a moment. He said, look, we basically we went out for dinner. Yeah. It was one of those typical entrepreneurial moments. It was, it was all right. Yeah, I mean, it was near my parents' house. So, so we went out for this dinner. Yeah. We got a napkin, line down the middle, company X. I actually put Masala Masala, and then I put company X. Yeah. And he scrubbed out Masala Masala, and he put company Y. So we actually had it in the wrong way. But he said, you can't look at that, because if you look at Masala, it's just too close to your heart. Yeah. It's your baby. So you're never going to want to leave that. He said, company Y, company X. And then we sort of did a very quick sort of financial forecast. Yes. Is this affordable? What does it mean? On one side, flipped it over, same columns on the other side. And then one said, it was really funny. So with company Y. I've still got this napkin somewhere, and it said sell curry sauces, feed the homeless, and it's had company X and it had education, and I just had goosebumps. I looked at it and I thought, I can't not do this. I feel sort of slightly responsible, a sense of responsibility to build this, and so that was the moment I decided that I would actually stop everything and build a tech company, and then it was really fascinating.
Can I ask quickly just one side question? Your husband in this whole thing is sitting there and having to be completely, I suppose, dispassionate and take his emotions out of what he wants or anything like that.
That's one way of putting it.
Well, I don't know, I'm interested kind of in terms of the stories of entrepreneurs and actually how they make decisions, or even not entrepreneurs, just people who make big decisions, and they've got kind of, and they're getting the advice from people around them.
Yeah.
How was he in the whole experience, and how
did
he allow you to make that decision without him being like, oh, this is...
I think I could be really PC and say what I'm supposed to say, but let me be really honest instead. Please. My husband probably just never signed up for this. He met me when I was 20, right? So he met me when I was at law school, and he thought that he was probably marrying this, barrister, and it's all going to be really easy, and then we're going to have kids at some point. And instead, what happened was we did that for 4 years. I was doing that for 4 years, and then I just decided to do something really mad. And kudos to him. He's sort of been on this roller coaster with me. So at that point, I'd already quit everything and run a food company, and he'd seen me. And when we talk about business, this is not some really sexy thing that like you see on The Apprentice or on Dragon's Den. We've made business look like one thing. Actually, it's blood, sweat and tears. He was there on the Saturday mornings setting up the food stalls at Taste of London or at the Specialty Fine Food Fair. You're doing it yourselves because it's sort of a start-up. You've got cuts and bruises all over your arms. You're lugging all of the stock and pulling fridges everywhere. And we used to do this stuff. And he's seen the brunt of the hard work that goes into this. So I'd gone from a 3-piece suit as a barrister to, a hoodie and joggers and setting up a food company. So see, for him, I just think what he did say to me is he just said, you've just got to be happy with whatever you're doing. And so it was really nice. He just said, look, whatever's going to make you happy, I'll support you. And at this point, he's got this, he's 6 years older than me. He's got this sort of high-flying career. And he said, it doesn't matter. Try it. But I'm also really ambitious. So, but I also understand, what data looks like, whether you're succeeding or not. So I've always been sort of like, look, I'm not going to do this for 10 years and found that it's not working. I'll do it for a few months and then I'll iterate, I'll figure out a way. So he also thought it was a really good idea. So when he looked at it, because at this point we had a 2-year-old daughter and my son had just been born, he said, this is so needed. This is what we need. So he was very much sort of trying to be a supportive husband, but as well as actually looking at it as an objective idea. Yeah, and he was working as a venture capitalist in the tech world. So this is somebody now who understands how to build software or has seen it happening and how it gets funded. But it was just, I suppose it's equally exciting but equally terrifying, for him. So he helped make that decision, but he's also the person who at 3 o'clock in the morning, because I'm an insomniac and he likes to sleep early, so we're one of those couples that have we're on different time zones.
Which is why you're happily together.
I would live perfectly if I was in basically New York, right? And I've lived there and it was fine. But where I would at 3 o'clock in the morning be looking at lots of research and I would write in pencil, I've still got this piece of paper, I am in over my head. Yeah. And then I'd write that. He'd walk downstairs in the morning, he'd sort of see that in the office on the desk. And then when I came down later, he'd just be like, he would support me and say, no, you can do this. And that is that child in me who has been told that you're not good enough.
Right, okay.
So I would look at other tech companies and I would look at all of the C-levels and they'd all have MBAs, right, or PhDs. And I would look at it and just think, that's not me. How do I do that? And so I would have these moments of weakness and vulnerability. But I don't know why this is, and I can't give you a really good explanation, but I would wake up the next morning and sort of forget about it and just continue going. And so it's one of those, and I suppose a lot of that comes down to what my parents taught me. They always told me to persevere. Yeah. Resilience is something that was sort of taught in our family. Yeah. And I saw my dad, who is, my parents are the most inspirational people to me because they're entrepreneurs. So I've seen them go through that roller coaster journey and the resilience in the family. So I suppose I've lived with that and been brought up with that. Maybe take it for granted.
So go on, the jump into the tech world, How were you jumping into it? Did you embrace it, or was it like, this is kind of a crazy world?
You just get on with it. I mean, so it was one of those situations where I had the idea. We were having dinner at Zaza in Pinner, where my parents live. Yeah. There you go. I decided that evening, this is something that I'm going to do. And then I just got on with it. I mean, it's literally one of those things where you just get momentum, right? Yeah. So I thought about a name. And because I kept talking about how education should be brought into the 21st century, I was like, that's a good name. Started looking into that, registered the company. Then I did a lot more research. So I went to completely different schools. I went around the world. I went to the US. I looked at what was there, and really started to understand how this technology works. So I did a nano degree in artificial intelligence, in neuroscience. I was spending time at the British Library, really understanding how this all worked. I wanted to do something different. I didn't want to it was about solving stakeholders' problems. This was not about, oh look, here's a really big market, let's just try and jam some really sort of sexy technology into it. It was, you have problems, I want to try and solve those problems.
So out of interest, do you think it was almost an advantage to you, the fact you didn't know, you weren't from the tech world or anything like that, so therefore you're actually focused on what the problem was?
No, I'm 100% clear on the fact that I am very grateful that I did not know anything about technology when I started, because I'm not wedded to any particular way of doing things. What I am wedded to do is to solve some problems. So it was, okay, I understand how the technology all works now and how you apply it in different sectors. How would you use that to solve some of these problems? And then it's just, you can think without, in a sense, narrowing your focus on certain areas, and you can think outside the box. So I was looking at what product to build, spoke to lots of technologists as well, and thought, how does this work? Went to Silicon Valley, spoke to people there, and thought, we're going to do this, we're going to build something really extraordinary. But actually spoke to a lot of teachers and, and what they thought. And what's really interesting, I spoke to some teachers, and it was that sort of Henry Ford situation where they want faster horses. So it was trying to understand, okay, well, what do you want a faster horse for? But then thinking, well, hang on, there's this technology out here that you haven't experienced that can do a lot of that far quicker. And it was this technology, obviously, that can predictively forecast, it's intelligent, and talking about the technology too much scares some teachers, because they just think this is really like Armageddon, like, there's ethical implications, data, etc., etc. But also what I was grateful for was, because my background wasn't from technology, I was able to explain it in a way that people understood it, right? Because sometimes you read some of these texts or books, and unless you are a technologist, you're not going to understand what they're talking about. So it's about being able to break this down into very simple terms that people just think, right, I get what problem that solves, I get how it works, I get the risks. I understand now how to mitigate those risks, or how you're going to mitigate those risks. And it was just having a very, very sensible conversation with people who have fundamental issues. So, and that's basically what we did. And then gather momentum. And after that, it is all about momentum. It's all about, there are going to be barriers thrown up in front of you. There are going to be barriers that are already there. You've got to pick which ones you want to knock down, and you've got to pick which ones you want to circumvent. Because if you try and knock some barriers down, you're just going to stand in front of them all day. So it's about not suffering from paralysis over analysis. It's about, actually, okay, I know enough now, how am I going to move forward? And it's exciting, because these products are all about, being agile, and sort of I was reading all the books that you needed to read, like Eric Ries's book on the lean startup, and they're all fantastic. I was reading venture deals on how to raise money. I was going and speaking to how to raise money for this, which I hadn't done before. So I asked my husband, he said, oh, we don't really raise that type of money, we raise millions. And I was just like, that's not very helpful. So
just give me a little bit of it.
I was just thinking, well, that's not very helpful. So I actually just ignored him completely. And I Googled, so who are these venture capitalists then? And Balderton came up. Balderton's a very well-known venture capital firm here, and Eden Ventures. So I just called them. And then this partner from Balderton called Saranga said, I'll have a Skype with you. And he Skyped me for an hour and just told me exactly what I needed to do.
What was that? Was that just a moment in time you got lucky, or was it just you?
No, he's just a helpful guy. And I think one thing we forget in Britain is that we have this culture here where actually people can be incredibly helpful. That may be the case in other places, but one thing I know about this country is there'll be, if you ask 10 people for help, a fair amount of them will say, okay, I want to help you. And we forget that sometimes. And so, no, I just called him. I just said, it was a cold call. I just said, look, I'm this random person you don't know. I want to start a tech company. I've got no clue how to raise money. For an hour, he sat on the phone with me. For an hour, someone from Eden Ventures was on the phone with me. And they said, this is what you need to do. And between both of those pieces of advice, I created the business plan. I created an information memorandum, so it was really detailed. I created a video. I went to some events and I just I called some entrepreneurs that I knew and said, how do you raise money? And they said, well, go to these events and find out. I went. And the point is, you have to turn up. Right, and this is something that's really, really interesting. Because I remember some people sort of commenting and saying, why are you going here? Why are you going there? You don't have a product. I said, well, I've got to find out what I need to do. I've got to speak to more people. And so, and you know, emails are very, very easy for people to reject. And I learned this actually when I ran my food company. Was you don't try and pitch a product via an email to a buyer at a supermarket. You turn up. Because humans find it really hard to say no to humans face to face, right? It's everyone gets 200-300 non-spam emails in their inbox every day. Everyone's important, everyone's busy. So actually you just need to be in the right place and you need to catch them when they've got a bit of time. So I was going out to these events. The first event I attended resulted, right, through people telling people in £540,000 investment on a piece of paper. And people were saying to me, you're never going to be able to run a tech company, you're not going to be able to raise money. One, I remember, who ran an ed tech company, told another investor, because they were asked to do due diligence on me, said she's not a former Google engineer, how on earth is she going to do this? So they chose not to invest on that basis. I remember that meeting. You know, you remember the people that say, no, you can't. I got a 2-page essay from one investor who spent obviously a fair amount of time telling me why I was ridiculous. And I still have that as well. And I look at it and I think actually what I learned, and it's similar to when I was at school and I wanted to be, and this is what I often talk about when I'm speaking to people, you know, because it depends on what they ask you to talk about, but it's about, look, whenever you've got an idea that is not the norm, you know, even if you're a business and you've spotted a trend in customer behaviour that's slightly different and you want to change customer behaviour off the back of that, if you go to lots of people, a lot of them will say, no, don't do it. They'll be risk averse. But when people say no, they don't say, I don't know. They say, no, it's not going to work. What I found is people are really binary, right? Especially in the investment world. No, it's not going to work, you're crazy. Or, yes, I'll back you and I'll invest. What you don't often get are just people who say, do you know what, I don't know.
Or
I've chosen not to invest, but I have no idea.
I'll give you my opinion, but I've just chosen this way because it's my thought.
Whereas actually, so many stories will tell you that they didn't invest, but they had no idea, right? Because those companies might fail, they might succeed. But so I find that a lot of entrepreneurs are put off when they get the no's. And so you have to figure out how you're going to deal with the naysayers. I got that at school when I wanted to be a barrister. Right? I got that as a barrister when I was applying for roles in a very specific niche role because I wanted to be a libel lawyer. I got no's. I got no's when I wanted to enter supermarkets, when I set up Masala Masala. I got no's when I wanted to set up the tech company, right? And you get no's all the time. So what you've got to do is reach out and get the people who will help you, like the Sarangas from Balderton of the world, right? You've got to reach out and speak, you know, you've got to get advice. You've got to take whatever you can from that advice that is constructive and listen to it, right? And adapt your approach. But you've also got to figure out that you've got to be resilient enough to say, actually, with everything that I've got in front of me, I believe what I'm doing and I'm going to go forward with conviction. Because if you don't, that's when people stop and they fail. And, you know, my dad has always said to me, you know, when you've got that idea, 10 other people are working on the same idea. And he says, you know, so many will fall away just because they'll listen to everybody else and they'll fall away. But, you know, don't be under any illusion. You're not the only one working on this at any given point. You've just got to keep going and going and going. And listening to that feedback, that constructive feedback, adapting as you go, and making sure that, you know, when you're building a product or service, that you get to that product market fit. But this is key, because here in this country we've got this terrible, you know, I think it happens. I've seen it everywhere where we get this "I can't" attitude. And some people say I can't. And it's not very American, right? Because the Americans are very I can. And I think that's something that we need to change, and something that we need to help people change within organisations, but also within education, so that we become, you know, a resilient country in terms of, if we want to do something as an individual with an idea, then we actually go forward with it and we learn how to take feedback, but not just stop in our tracks. And we find those people who are willing to help us. You know.
So let me ask one more last question, which is, Century is expanding, growing enormously, and doing hopefully what you set out for it to do, and it's going international and going to still different countries. Are you getting what you wanted out of it? Is it giving you the social impact that you dreamed of, that you wanted to achieve? And what's next?
Yeah, so Century's absolutely giving me and my team the feedback that we set out for. I mean, we didn't know we were going to get it, right? So this is a company where we built it and deployed it secretly for 2 years and didn't tell anyone about it. Apart from we put it out there into the market with certain schools to see if it worked, because we said we're not going to deploy it elsewhere if it doesn't work. And working for us was all about impact. It was about an impact measurement. And so we've seen it improve outcomes across the board. The biggest moment for us was when it improved outcomes for economically disadvantaged students in the same way it improved outcomes for everyone else, because we thought we want to increase social mobility. You know, we want to make sure we've got digital inclusion, not digital exclusion. You know, when if you go to Lebanon and you see some of the refugee children learning off this machine, and they wouldn't have access to education otherwise, that's wonderful. I mean, there's a lot more work that we've got to do, but that's wonderful. If you go to the school in Kent where the little girl turned around and said, "This is the only time when I'm learning maths and English that I don't feel stupid, because it's a machine that adapts towards my needs," etc., etc. That's worth £7 million that I've spent building this so far. So we feel great about that, but we're still really ambitious. We've got a long way to go. This is education, right? It touches everybody. So we have a lot to do. So no, it's going really well. But we're always there to listen to feedback and you know, hear our stakeholders and innovate at the same time. So what's next? You know, I just think this is it. You know, I think this is a really big sector. So we signed, it was really exciting that we signed Flanders in Belgium. So we now have experience of working with governments. We've got a few more government ministries that we're working with. And that's a different business model for us. But it's exciting because it goes straight into public schools. It goes to, you know, where it is really, really needed. And I just think that education is a long game, right? It's not something, this was never going to be one of those enterprises where you build it and 3 years later it's no longer yours. I think I've got a lot of work to do. But I'm also building an ecosystem around Century. So we work with partners who can take Century to places where we might not be the best people to take it. And that is about us being really open. And we're excited about technology, but we're also very clear on what we're really good at. And so we're not one of those enterprises that says, right, you know, this is all ours and this is how we're getting, you know, it's about how to create an education ecosystem to make it work for the child, right, and the teacher. And that's and our milestones show that. You know, they actually demonstrate that. It's not just us saying that. So I think it's about building on that, making sure that we've got the right people. Our team is amazing. I couldn't ask for a better team. I couldn't dream of a better team, actually. Not only are they top tier talent, but we have a culture at Century that is that I think is second to none. I really do. And I often talk about this. I have, you know, these. And I love it. I mean, you know, I'm often asked to go and speak about culture and how to build a true culture of innovation. And it's really hard to do, but actually it's the right thing to do. And sometimes the right thing to do is very, very difficult. But, you know, there are actual steps that a company can take or a business can take that they have to be serious about at board level and implement those steps to create and breed a culture of innovation. And we've done that at Century, even with 60 people. It's about hiring the right talent. How do you do that? Where do you look for it? You know, is the talent growing with the business? You know, what values do we put in place? Are these just bullet points you put on the door that look really cool, but no one pays attention to it? You know, how do we do that? And I think that we've managed to really nail that at Century, because tech is really hard to hire for. But actually, yes, the supply is short and it's getting shorter. You know, it's getting smaller and smaller. The pool is getting smaller, but we've had no issue hiring really good people, getting people to move country for us. So
So on that point, and Bert, I'd like to thank you so much indeed.
Thank you.
What I'd like to ask though, and that last point is, I'd love you to come back and we can explore the culture and explore talent recruitment at another time.
Absolutely, no, I'd love to do that.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Nick.
Look forward to chatting soon.
Cheers. Thank you.